Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Business Insider Newsroom. I'm Melia Russell, a senior correspondent covering tech and law, and I help put together our annual Seed 100 and Seed 40 list. These lists spotlight top early stage investors, VCs who are proving they have a knack for spotting the next big thing before the rest of us. Today, you'll get to hear from two investors on our lists, Bradley Horowitz of Wisdom Ventures and Nisha Dua of BBG Ventures. But first, I want to bring in my colleague, senior correspondent Ben Bergman, who also worked on the Seed 100. Hey, Ben.
Good to see you.
Hi. So this is the 6th year that we've worked on the Seed 100 list. Continues to be a hit. Why is this list important?
Well, I think people want to know who makes these really early bets in companies. I mean, we and everyone else keep talking about these big companies right now that are preparing to go public, companies like Anthropic and OpenAI and, of course, SpaceX. But before everyone knew those companies and everyone wanted to be investors in those companies, there were people who wrote the first checks into those companies which were controversial, which a lot of people didn't believe in. And I think that's really the highest risk, also the highest reward in venture capital.
Right. They look obvious today and then looked pretty wild. So happy to tell you a little bit about kind of the methodology of this list and how we put it together. The Seed 100 is very much not a popularity contest. It's not about which Business Insider reporters you know. We partner with a third-party data provider called Termina. They make software for quantitative due diligence. And the list, in its simplest form, is trying to highlight those early investors who went on to achieve success with their deal making. And we look at 3 main criteria. Exits. We want to know that they made investments that went on to have meaningful outcomes. That might look like going public or being acquired. That metric gets the heaviest weight in our criteria. It demonstrates that these VCs shepherded the company from inception to a real viable outcome. Second, follow-on funding. It might take 10, 20 years for some of these startups to exit, but if they can raise subsequent rounds of funding, it gives us a kind of intermediate signal that the market is validating those deals. Third criteria is just continued investment activity. We want this list to be a utility for founders, and so the people on it are very much active participants in the market.
Yeah, and people do always ask about how to get on this list. And it's definitely, a little bit hard to say right now who the best seed investors of 2026 are, because we will know the best investors right now in 10 years. Because remember, venture capital is measured in about 10 years, especially this early stage investing. So we in some ways don't really know, but it's a little backwards looking, but we are trying our best to say who is getting in these deals, who's been able to show meaningful returns right now, and who we think are the best. But I'm sure there'll be someone we look at in 10 years who no one's ever heard of, who didn't make the
Right.
list, who is just crushing it right now, finding that company that no one has ever heard of. But seed investing, I think, has also changed a lot lately. The definition of a seed round has gotten kind of nuts. You had Mir Murati, from formerly of OpenAI, who landed a record-breaking $2 billion seed round last year. You also had Jan LeCun, Meta's former chief AI scientist. He announced a $1 billion seed round in March, because it used to be that seed investing was all about spotting something really early, and these were really small check sizes. Now you can see these $1 billion check sizes, which of course is all about spotting that next breakout AI company. A lot of people still think that's nuts to invest $1 billion in a company that has no revenue, let alone any product. But you're seeing it right now. Very interesting times to be covering. And Malia, what are some of the other ways that seed investing is changing?
I mean, we hear all the time, there's no such thing as an AI company anymore because AI is everywhere. And even though this list does take a long time horizon, we still saw that show up in the data. If you were early to invest in AI before it became the frenzy that it is today, you benefited in your Seed 100 ranking because those investments went on to raise subsequent capital. Maybe they got snapped up by an AI lab or a FANG company. And since follow-on funding is one of the more important criteria of this list, it boosted your ranking. Two investors that came to mind for me, Matt Harris at Bain Capital Ventures and Bogomil Balkansky at Sequoia Capital. Matt debuted on this list at number 28. And at Bain Capital, he is known as the fintech guy. But you look at an investment like Norm AI, which is one of these AI native law firms that I've written about, and you really get a sense of where the market is going. Matt invested back in 2024. Norm announced 2 rounds of back-to-back funding last year alone, bringing its total funding to $140 million. That kind of traction is exactly the validation that our methodology picks up. Bogomil Balkansky, another strong example. He leads a team or works with a team at Sequoia focused on seed stage investing. And he makes these deals across enterprise software, developer tools, cybersecurity, cloud infrastructure. These are the scaffolding around what makes AI work in the enterprise, and Sequoia's now got a stake in that action. Ben, anyone else kind of come to mind for you?
Yeah, a lot of interesting people on this list. And I think also pointing out that overall in seed, there's fewer smaller deals happening. So deals below 5 million, which used to be a pretty big seed round, fewer of those deals happening. The only increase in deals in terms of deal count is over 10 million. So it's really those bigger seed checks, which makes it harder for a lot of people. The game has changed. But one of the people I was interested in is also Salil Deshmande, uncorrelated. He's the second largest solo GP, which means he does it all by himself. A lot of these VC firms have a lot of back office people, a lot of associates, but he manages almost $800 million all by himself. And I actually sat down with him last week at Web Summit in Vancouver, and he told me he's using a lot of AI to do everything from guiding investment decisions to doing diligence on companies to responding to every email. And he really sees that as a future. So a lot of VCs, of course, not only investing in AI, but using it themselves. But one really interesting thing I think he told me is that he believes that the market has become over frothy, that there is a bubble. And a lot of VCs say that, but he actually went so far as to say that he's pulling back on his investing because he thinks it's gotten so frothy and he's not writing as many checks as he used to. He said he started doing that last year. Most VCs don't really do that because it kind of goes against the business model because you're supposed to be investing, you're supposed to be doing something. But he does feel that the market has gotten a little too frothy at this point.
Well, then I'm glad we're going to chat with some VCs who are still out there writing checks. I know, Ben, a few days ago, you had the chance to speak with someone who's been on our list multiple times, right? Salil, but also Bradley Horowitz of Wisdom Ventures. What do you think our viewers should know about Bradley?
Yeah, well, Bradley is just one of the goats as seed investors, and that's what makes him a perennial top finisher on the Business Insider Seed 100. He was VP of product at Google for 15 years, did the things we use in our lives like Google Photos, Google News, and then he's been making a lot of angel investments, and then he started his own firm, Wisdom Ventures. But it's kind of crazy the number of companies that he's been in. It's really the dream for any seed investor because he did Cerebras, which of course went public last week very early on. But he's one of the few people who is in OpenAI and Anthropic very early on. And I asked him how he did that.
We had known about Sam Altman and OpenAI really since the beginning. I think many of us in the industry that have been working on AI have been tracking the progress that they had made. The firm didn't exist when they were founded. I think had it existed, we'd have been in even earlier. But we had a long-standing relationship with Sam, and that includes not only myself. I knew him from the early days of Y Combinator when he was CEO of Looped. I think they were in the second Y Combinator cohort. My partner Soren had an independent relationship with Sam, and my partner Jack had an independent relationship with Sam. And as we thought about investing for impact, not just financial impact, but societal impact, we realized that AI was going to have a bigger impact than almost anything else across the board, from everything from the economy and huge fractions of GDP. It was going to be a disruptive force in the world. And that getting involved would not only be lucrative financially, but also we aspire to have an influence on the future direction of these companies. And so what really entailed investing was approaching Sam and having a conversation about the values and ethics of the firm, what he was up to and wanted to do. And one thing led to another, and we were privileged to get in, not early, but early enough that we've seen huge appreciation in that position. We were part of the, I believe, the $29 billion round. And of course, by many measures, OpenAI is approaching $1 trillion valuation today. What was interesting is we then approached Anthropic, and as well understood, Anthropic is sort of founded on a values-based approach toward making sure that AI has good outcomes for society. And what's really unusual is investing in both OpenAI and Anthropic. So we weren't sure if that would work for them. We were sure it would work for us because our goal is not to pick a single winner. The ethics of the firm really want humanity itself to be the winner. So we felt we could participate fully in both companies and really steer both of them towards better outcomes. And we were delighted that Anthropic accepted our investment. In that one, we got in on the $18 billion round. And as you know, Anthropic today is also approaching $1 trillion market cap. So just really feel privileged and lucky to have been tracking those companies and to have had the audacity to ask both of them if we might be present on the cap table. And we're delighted to watch their progress over the years since we've invested.
Yeah, because you alluded to this, but traditionally there's been a prohibition in Silicon Valley against investing in competing companies early. Did you have to go ask, Sam or OpenAI for permission to also invest in Anthropic? Because I knew
Yes.
that they prohibited that for a while.
Yeah, we did. We did talk to both of them, and we wanted to ensure that it was okay, and also that we were clear on our intentions. And obviously, we are not privy to the uh, deep, dark secrets of either company, and we're certainly not a vector for any information to flow between them. And once the companies understood our intentions, I think it was an easy yes from both of them.
Well, fast forward to today, and you've just announced a third fund, $77 million. Congratulations on that. And it's really interesting, I think, what you're doing with this fund, because after spending, 15 years at Google developing the products that are so ubiquitous in our lives, like Google Photos, Google News, and of course, investing in these big AI companies, you are now focusing on tech-centered wellness to get people off their screens. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm really excited about Wisdom Ventures, and you said it. There really is a loneliness epidemic right now, and I think some of that is accountable to tech. We have sort of a doom scrolling epidemic right now. And one of the things we did was bring on the former Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, and he was Surgeon General under Obama and Biden. And he wrote a book on the loneliness epidemic and the impact it's having on humanity. And it turns out that social isolation leads to extremely bad health outcomes. It's sort of equivalent to smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. And so it's not just a mental health crisis, it really is a physical health crisis as well. So as we think about tech-enabled wellness, one of the categories we're excited about is getting people away from screens and into their community in real life. And so we've done this sort of in a couple ways. Our portfolio includes companies like the Light Phone, which is a reduced feature set phone. So you can actually call the babysitter and navigate to the restaurant, but you don't sit there doom scrolling. You're actually present with your companion. Another one is a screen saving app called Opal, which sort of sets up self-imposed barriers to certain apps at certain times so that you can actually keep honest to the focus that you want to have. And then other applications are things like Rec. Rec is, as in Parks and Rec, REC. Rec is a startup that is helping people get off of screens and out into their communities to play recreational sports. They sell this to the Parks and Rec departments, which are either using no software at all or antiquated software. And these are ex-Uber executives that basically said, why can't I order a pickleball game the same way I order an Uber? I want to play at 3 o'clock with a terrible C-minus player like myself within 3 kilometers of my home. And then it will find the player, match you up, and then key to this is reserve the court. It's actually the municipality that purchased their software. And that one is off to the races and thriving. They're just about to embark on a fundraise, and we're really excited about that. But it's an example of something we never imagined we'd be investing in sports tech. But when we met the founders, who were incredibly compelling, and really thought about the application, it gets people off screens, exercising in their communities. And it was sort of check, 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 check. And so we're thrilled to be part of that and other applications like that. But when we say tech-enabled wellness, it's a pretty broad aperture. You know, it's not just around loneliness or social isolation or mental health. We want to fund tech that's good for people. And we think that's a very broad category. And it's a little bit of we know it when we see it. But our LPs are obviously comfortable trusting us with that judgment. And we're excited about the category.
And I always ask VCs what they look for in founders, and usually it's always the same things, grit, resilience. But I thought your answer when we spoke earlier was so interesting because you said you look for people who've been in kitchens, which I thought was a metaphor, but it's actually literal. So just explain that and what you look for in founders.
It is true. And, you know, by the time a candidate reached me at Google, I knew they were valedictorian in perfect SATs and gold medal in the Olympics or some, set of extraordinary achievements. And what I wanted to test, having been through all the normal things and pedigrees, is sort of what is this person like under stress? And what is it going to be like to do a complicated journey into the unknown with this person as my teammate and companion? And so a lot of what I looked for were examples in their background that showed they could deal with not only complexity in terms of algorithms and managing projects, but really sort of being in the trenches in stressful situations and thriving there. And so I do think kitchens are one great example. It wasn't mandatory. It's not like everybody who worked at Google under me was a sort of former sous chef or something. But I think kitchens are great examples because you have angry, hungry customers, you have knives and fire, you have the time constraints of getting the food out in a timely fashion. So that all of the dynamics of sort of high intensity startup life are sort of manifest in a kitchen on a daily basis. So there can be other sort of examples, but I was always probing and digging for something beyond the pedigree that helped me understand who this person was and how they were going to react when it all fell apart.
You also said you apply something called the flat tire test. Explain to our viewers what that is.
Yeah, this is fun. And it's something we all know. There are certain friends where if you embark on a journey, you're on a road trip, and in the second hour, you get a flat tire. Some people are really a drag and like, I can't believe our bad luck and this is terrible. And then there are other people for whom, oh my God, the adventure begins, and we're going to tell our grandkids about this. And they're sort of into the spirit of let's make lemonade from the lemons. Let's turn this into an epic adventure. And you want to be with those people because inevitably on this journey, and I think never more than this moment, we just don't have much horizon visible to us. You know, we don't know what the future is going to look like. And so I want to be with people that when it all falls apart or goes a different direction than we anticipated, their attitude is to roll up their sleeves and let's get to work, as opposed to being, freaked out or bummed out or deer in the headlights.
Well, and lastly, Bradley, I just want to ask about you. You just celebrated a birthday. You had such a successful career at Google. You've done these amazing investments. You could obviously afford to retire and spend time in that lovely home and elsewhere. But are going more than ever. You're very focused on wisdom with this third fund and investing institutionally now. And I'm just curious, what keeps you going? Why you still love the thrill of venture?
What keeps me going, first of all, I've made every mistake in the book. I've been an academic, an entrepreneur myself. I've acquired companies. I've helped companies get acquired, angel investor, now institutional investor. I've seen a lot in my day. And it would sort of be criminal to just sort of walk off with the battle scars and the hard-earned knowledge that I've acquired. So I feel some amount of duty to sort of help people that are smarter and more capable than I am not make the same mistakes I've already made on their behalf. So a big part of this is just a sense of duty. And part of it is the asymmetry. Something that's super easy for me can make a big difference for them. And that's sort of the privileged position where I find myself today. Is I feel like I've got all this hard-earned knowledge and it would be sort of unconscionable to just walk off with it. I can open the door for other super capable people. The other answer to that really is around the mission of Wisdom Ventures and my partners. I work with an extremely talented group of people that are all mission oriented. None of them are doing this for profit. We are all doing it because we care deeply about the mission and are techno realists, but have an optimism that there's a lot more that can be done to help people thrive and flourish with technology. And we're incredibly confident of that and seeing that manifest in our portfolio. So what gets me excited is spending time with these founders. These founders are amazing, and it's an absolute privilege to work with them, to give them a little bit of fuel and a little bit of wisdom along the way, and then watch them run. And when it works, it's absolutely thrilling.
Bradley, this is my direct pitch to you. I am super capable and I have worked at a Quiznos. So if I have a startup idea, I will find you. Along with the Seed 100, we also published the Seed 40, a list that specifically highlights the top women investors. And today, I'm so excited to welcome a powerhouse from that list, Nisha Dua, managing partner and co-founder of BBG Ventures. BBG's focus is on what it calls underestimated entrepreneurs. Nisha's backed breakout companies like Spring Health, Zola, Starface, Topline Pro, and many others. Nisha, welcome to Business Insider's newsroom, and congrats for making the Seed 40 list.
Hey, excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, we have heard a lot about AI, that it is like if you backed AI early, you saw your ranking go up on this list. And what I love about your story is like you are not a consensus investor, and in fact maybe have like a healthy AI skepticism. Why is that?
Skepticism is an interesting way of putting it. I mean, maybe what I would back up and say is we're not a cycle fund. So we've been investing since 2014. We've seen mobile, we've seen SaaS, we've seen Web3 and the NFT craze, and now we're in AI. Mm-hmm. And so our thesis is really about, how is American behavior shifting? What are the preferences, priorities, and behaviors of Americans? But if you think about every platform shift, and those categories roughly mirror all the platform shifts, capital converges, right? So capital goes in the same direction. It goes to the same founder archetypes, the same networks, and the same pattern matching. And we're seeing that play out right now. I think the top 10 deals last year got like 40% of venture dollars. 54% of deals were done in San Francisco. I think you and Ben were talking about some of these themes before. But, if we have a sense of, let's call it the commodity middle, most funds putting in their dollars into horizontal AI, point solutions, wrappers, then where is the alpha? And so we've really tried to stay, I think, on the edges of the innovation spectrum.
And you're not saying no AI
No.
in your BBG vendor. Your LPs would probably take issue with that if so.
I mean, maybe.
It has a place in your portfolio.
Yeah.
Like, can you tell me a little bit more about what is the investment
Yeah.
strategy then?
So we call it the barbell. And on one end, we talk about investing in companies that drive deep technology leverage. So yes, AI or software 3.0, which is what we're all going to start calling it.
Oh, I didn't know this. Okay, good to know.
But, how are those companies driving net new behavior or new value pools? These companies are building end-to-end solutions. They're building a new system of action, right? Taking insight to action. And they're using institutional knowledge or proprietary knowledge to compound. But that stays away from that middle set of companies that I was describing. And all the way on the other end, we have companies that we call deep humanity companies. So what are the emotional, social, or physical needs that still need to be met despite AI, or maybe right now even because of it? And that could be companies in women's sports, for example. It could be organic baby formula, where consumers have not had another option in 40 years, or it could be in beauty. So a great example of that is our company Starface. Starface took the age-old category of acne and said, let's turn a category of, historically shame, embarrassment into one of joy. And so you see that today in every street corner where you see teenagers, they're rocking gold stars over their acne, and they are turning a moment of flaw.
I've literally seen these and I had no
Yes.
idea what they
Yeah.
were.
Justin Bieber's wearing them, the basketball players are wearing them, everyone's wearing them. And they just did a big $105 million, minority equity round. And you can really see the power of, I think in that case, the moat is community and identity and taste. And so I think we're going to see even more of those companies come to fore.
Yeah, I hear that sometimes, that like in the age of AI, taste is one of the most valuable skill sets you can have when you can build anything, I guess. So in that sea of founders looking for capital right now and in your inbox, what are you looking for? What catches your attention right now?
Yeah, well, we have a hypothesis around what we call the polycultural future of America. So we've been tracking the passage of the monoculture to the polyculture, and we've done some real proprietary research, across 2,000 Americans to say, like, how do you view identity? And we think that identity today is this like multifaceted concept. It's dynamic, it's fluid, it's moving. That can cross age, race, gender, socioeconomic status, and that's driving new demand across every fundamental need state. So health, work, financial security, climate, consumer. But that means you need founders who have really been inside those problems. So we call that lived experience. So when you're in Silicon Valley, you'll classically hear the words earned insight. Traditionally, that means learned experience, like where did you work, what logos have you collected along the way. But we think that two things matter, lived and learned experience. So a really great example of that is a founder in our portfolio, April Ko. She is the co-founder and CEO of Spring Health. I think youngest unicorn founder might be, kind of female founder, might be her claim to fame. But I think her fame is much bigger because that company today covers 170 million lives for employer benefits for mental health. But she founded the company because she struggled with her own mental health. She struggled to find a therapist, and she watched her roommates do the same. And so when it comes to therapy, that's your biggest friction point, is finding a therapist. And that's where you opt out of care. So she took her own experiences and she teamed up with Adam, who wrote his PhD on how to use machine learning and AI to connect patients with the right therapists for them. And today they're valued at over $3 billion, and they cover hundreds of millions of lives to deliver mental health care.
So you're seeing there the partnership between that lived experience
exactly right.
and maybe the Ivy League degree in the, with the ML, undergrad. But no, that's interesting, and reminds me of what Bradley was saying about not just working in kitchens, but he expressed this interest in tech-enabled wellness. Like, there are so many corners of the tech ecosystem right now that aren't ChatGPT wrappers, but that like meet people in their lives.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And when you look at these founders with lived experience, they're often coming from outlier backgrounds. They weren't necessarily part of these Silicon Valley networks. Yes, some of them went to Ivy League schools, but like me and my partner, my partner's a college dropout. I grew up in a small country town in Australia. my parents are Indian immigrants, we have also broken through some of those networks to build something different with BBG Ventures. And I think what all of these founders have in common is a desire to move the world forward. And so what we like to say is we're really investing at this intersection of, I think, world-changing ambition and humility. Because I think when you've been through the problem, you have this real reverence for what people have gone through.
Absolutely. So, Ben and I were talking a little earlier about how for founders going out to raise funding right now, there's a little bit of a haves and have-nots situation, right? If you've had the pixie dust sprinkled on you, you can go raise back-to-back rounds of financing from Sand Hill Road, offices. And it leaves a lot of founders kind of fighting for scraps. And what's interesting to me about that is the same thing is kind of happening in the venture ecosystem, where you have these major marquee name firms gobbling up the lion's share of investment dollars, LP money. And it's in recent years become more and more difficult for first-time fundraisers, emerging managers to raise their first and subsequent funds. You have lived this over the last 10 years. Are you seeing that binary play out in, among your peer set?
Yeah. I think it's harder than ever to raise a fund as an emerging manager.
Okay.
And we see this all the time. It's taking longer. And you already noted this. I think the data is something like in 2024, 20 funds took 60% of LP dollars for new fundraisers. And most of those funds were over $500 million. And I think that's echoing some of the themes we've already talked about, which is capital converges. It's converging around AI right now. And so if you're an LP, you feel like I can get a pretty fair shot of the game if I'm in these mega funds, because they're playing to be in all the companies, right? It's worse for them to miss the winner rather than make sure they just back the winner. For a smaller fund, the calculus is different, right? You have smaller AUM. But I think, the other piece of this, and I talked about this, is not just convergence around AI, but what a platform shift drives, which is convergence around the same networks. Now, an LP recently said in a publication, after the hubris of 21 and 22, there was this flight to quality. I think that can be a misnomer. What I would say is it's actually a flight to what I know and what has worked before. And so the LPs who think differently about emerging managers are really thinking about, well, firstly, how do I diversify my own portfolio? And where do I look that's different to do that? So if capital is converging in one place, and if as Salil said, we're in a bubble and we need to diversify, who are the managers that are going to find alpha and look for something different out of the norm? That's emerging managers, right? But it's particularly emerging managers who aren't just spin-outs. It's new team-ups and it's new entrants to VC, because those people are hustling harder. And I think they're looking at different communities and networks to find new founders. So it is harder, but I think they're a great bet to add to your portfolio.
I love that. Any advice right now for, some of these companies are maturing. We might see more people spin out to raise their own funds. They're walking into a hostile market. Maybe not if you're leaving OpenAI to start a fund, but any advice for aspiring fundraisers right now?
I should do my plug. I love LPs. I don't believe they're hostile. No, look, I think you have to have a real point of view. And this is what we say to founders as well. It's where do you think the world is going? And how are you going to change that part of the world? Or how are your investments going to change that part of the world? Right? And for us, it's this polycultural thesis and the fact that founders with lived experience who have that different shared identity state can really make a dent in any market they go after. But where I see most emerging managers go wrong is that they don't articulate a clear thesis and a clear reason that they have differentiated access. So, I meet a lot of people and I can tell you everyone wants to start a fund. It's really fun to go and invest, but you got to remember as well, I think the third thing is that you're a money manager. And so you have to be really great at portfolio construction and owning a portfolio. And so those things take time as well. And you should really arrive in the market, I think, with a clear point of view of how you can drive returns.
Yeah. So there's, one side of this coin is that what you're backing might change or how you think about constructing your portfolio, but also I understand that like the day-to-day life of a VC is also changing because of AI, and Ben shared a little bit about Salil's observations earlier. Are you using AI in your day-to-day work?
I mean, it's completely changed the way I work.
I would guess it's mandatory to some extent.
Yeah, and I mean, it's fascinating to me that you have commencement speakers being booed right now for their commentary on AI, but it is truly shifting the way we're doing our work day to day. You know, I would say it affects every part of the stack, from inbox triage to internal firm operations to how we do diligence. I mean, the way I think firms are going to start using associates and analysts is fundamentally shifting, which is a little scary. And I think we as an industry have some work to do to figure out how we're going to mentor young up-and-comers into the industry, because Claude can do a lot of that work today. But, you know, I think what's interesting to me and what worries me is when I hear VCs saying, you know, I built an algorithm to try and predict or pattern match who will be the next unicorn. Because I think, you know, that's kind of a flawed strategy.
We literally do a list like that.
You guys should do that. Should be the next list, and let's see how it goes, right? But to me, that's how you miss alpha, right? If you are going after the algorithmic pattern matching, what are the set of inputs that you have that is different? And so I think, you know, there's no replacement for judgment on top of that, and there's no replacement for being in person with a founder, assessing some of the things that Bradley was talking about, right? You know, and so we still think that that is really important. And if you look beyond the algorithm, you have to be in these outside communities, right? These tinkerers who have really grabbed a hold of a problem, who aren't just picking a TAM off a spreadsheet and saying, I want to go and be a founder. And so I think those are some of the things that AI still can't touch, but it is true that as a firm, you can do a lot more with a little today, and it can impact sourcing, it can get you to people faster. So in many ways, I think, you know, VCs, well, my VC is like a small business. I'm an emerging manager. It's as AI is to many small businesses today. I mean, it's a fundamental unlock in the productivity that you can achieve as a business, and that's really exciting.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Nisha, for being here today. And thanks to all of you who joined us on YouTube and LinkedIn. You can check out the full Seed 100 and Seed 40 on Business Insider. We'll see you next time.